So I told y'all in my short video yesterday that the Chicago Bears have decided to do their initial round of head coaching interviews via Zoom. And that has a lot of people feeling some type of way, including David Hall of 670 The Score. I got some thoughts about that, but let's get into it. Welcome back to Bears Yard. This your boy Vipe, and David Hall of 670 The Score is feeling some type of way about the Chicago Bears doing their initial round of head coaching interviews via Zoom. So roll the tape.
Bears decided to use Zoom to interview all 15, 16, whatever we're at, number of candidates in the first round, even though they could have met in person with a Mike Vrabel, with a Pete Carroll, and any other candidates whose seasons are over. Big mistake or smart use of time and money?
Big mistake. And it's because it's the Bears that it's a big mistake. Some of the things we've already addressed, but here's what it does. It only reinforces or maybe amplifies what is the Bears' biggest blind spot. They don't really understand, or they consistently underestimate, the power of perception. And when you are doing virtual interviews for everybody that you think could be your next head coach, you leave the impression that you're going on the cheap because you don't want to fly to see Mike Vrabel or Pete Carroll or whoever. You can't do that with 16 people. But if you think that all 16 of these candidates are on equal footing, you are kidding yourself. And you are delusional because there's nothing about Pete Carroll and Mike Vrabel that are, and Ben Johnson, giving him due respect, that are some of these other guys on the list that don't belong there, frankly, or don't deserve the kind of treatment or respect that a face-to-face interview with Pete Carroll implies. I would want to meet face-to-face with Pete Carroll. I would want to bring him in the building. So what it does is it leaves the impression by doing it this way that you're cheap. I don't think the Bears are cheap, but we all know that the Bears are fighting that perception on a regular basis, day after day, year after year. This looks cheap because you don't want to fly them in, you don't want to fly to them. It's also a missed opportunity to make an impression. So I don't think that it was a smart use of their time. I think it was a missed opportunity.
So David Hall said that the fact that the Bears doing these initial round of interviews via Zoom appears to make them look cheap. And he talked about how coaching candidates like Mike Vrabel and Pete Carroll are not on the same level as other candidates in the cycle, like a Mike Kafka or a Matt Campbell or whatever the case may be, right? But I think David Hall and a lot of people that have this similar mindset are slightly overreacting to the fact that the Bears are doing all their interviews via Zoom for the first round. You're watching Bears Yard, your home of opinionated Chicago Bears talk, Monday through Friday, right here on YouTube. So if you don't want to miss an episode, hit that subscribe button. Right now, I think the Bears are up to 17 candidates that they are planning to interview for this head coach opening. I'm sorry, I said it yesterday, and I will say it again. You are not bringing 17 men into Chicago. First of all, that wouldn't even be cost efficient. Do you know how much it will cost to fly 17 people into Chicago? You're not doing that. Secondly, the Bears are on a fact-finding mission in addition to doing these interviews, right? We have to know that most of these interviews are going to be fluff. I almost equated to what New England did with Pep Hamilton and Byron Leftwich when they ticked them off for interviews to fulfill the unity rule so they could ultimately go get Vrabel this weekend. Because Mike Vrabel is actually interviewing in New England today, in person, right? So how does Pep Hamilton and Byron Leftwich feel that New England had them come in for interviews, even though they had to agree to them? But New England brought them in for interview for a job they had to know they did not have any chance of getting, right? So at least with the Bears, they're not making all these dudes fly in there and have travel arrangements and everything like that, because most of these dudes have to know that they have no chance of getting the Chicago Bears job. We all know the names that are at the top of the list, the Ben Johnsons, the Mike Vrabels, the Pete Carrolls, and different things like that, who are actual legitimate contenders for the job. Matt Campbell's not getting this job. Mike Kafka is not getting the Bears job. Anthony Weaver is not getting this Bears job. So the fact that you're not inconveniencing people by making them travel, I think is actually a win in the Bears' favor. It shows these men that you respect their time, even though they're not going to have a legitimate chance to get the interview or get the job, excuse me. You're not making them fly into Chicago just to ultimately waste their time, but you're still allowing them to go through the interview process. And kind of like I was talking about yesterday with Matt Kafka being on this list as a favorite to his agent or whatever, just so he can get the process. So when he wants to become a head coach in the future, he'll have experience doing interviews. It's a lot like that. Listen, man, Courtney Cronin wrote in an article today that when the Bears do eventually fly people in, and they will have a first-class experience because they got ridiculed so hard when they made Dan Quinn fly coach for his head coaching interview back in 2021. Yeah, y'all, we actually interviewed Dan Quinn and passed over him for Matt Eberflus. But I digress. So when the time comes and the Bears will fly people in, that is when it will matter. When you actually have a legitimate list of 5 to 7 names of people who you will legitimately consider for the job, who you want to make an actual real impression on, you will fly them in a private jet or whatever the case may be, first class. You will fly them into Hallis Hall and meet them in person, give them a tour of the facility, all that jazz. This overreaction for the media, they like to overreact to a lot of things. We like to tear the Bears down. And I might be a little bit guilty of myself, but some things you just need to think about more practically. And this is one of the things where I feel like we need to be a little bit more practical in how we approach the Bears doing it this way. Also, the other thing that's not being talked about is that the Chicago Bears are only allowed to interview 3 of these people in person anyway if they wanted to do that. That would be Pete Carroll, Mike Vrabel, and Matt Campbell, the head coach from Iowa State. Everybody else has to be interviewed virtually per NFL rules. So you actually have NFL rules that dictate how these interviews go too. So you're getting mad at the Bears when most of their candidates have to be interviewed virtually anyway? What are we doing here? I mean, unless you want to wait till January 20th when you can interview people in person, but we're on the timeline, man. We got to get this done sooner rather than later. Also, doing these interviews virtually allows the Bears to conduct them in a faster manner, especially considering you have so many names on the list. So, again, I think it's a slight overreaction. I don't really mind the Bears interviewing all these people virtually. The Bears have a lot of negative perception around them right now. Hell, this video. The reason why I'm making this video because of the media and how they're reacting. So the Chicago Bears know that whoever they bring in, if it's a guy they really, really want, they have to make the absolute best impression on that candidate. Not just the candidate impressing them, but them impressing the candidate. And that involves flying that candidate into Chicago, wining and dining them, and then giving them a premium first-class experience with their visit to Hallis Hall. But Bear fans, do you feel like Hall has a point that the Bears are being cheap by not flying 16 people into Hallis Hall? Or do you feel like the Bears are being more practical? Drop a comment, and if you want more opinionated Bears talk, video right there.